The morning sun cast long shadows across the training grounds as Lieutenant Sarah Chun adjusted her tactical vest for the third time. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Today was the day she had been preparing for since joining the Elite Special Operations Command 6 months ago. The Advanced Combat Assessment would determine whether she had what it took to remain in the program or be transferred back to regular infantry. Around her, 23 other candidates prepared their equipment with the practiced efficiency of seasoned warriors. Most were men, their muscular frames filling out their gear with intimidating presence. Sarah stood barely 5 feet 4 inches tall, her slight build making her look more like a lost college student than a potential special forces operator. The other candidates had made their opinions about her presence abundantly clear during the previous months of training. "Hey, Chun," called out Sergeant Thompson, a hulking man from Texas whose voice carried the authority of someone who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan. "You sure you don't want to call your mommy before we start? This isn't going to be like the playground fights you're used to." Laughter rippled through the group. Sarah kept her eyes focused on checking her weapon, a standard M4 carbine that felt comfortable in her hands despite what others might think. She had heard variations of this taunt countless times. Thompson and his followers never seemed to tire of reminding her that she didn't belong here. "Maybe we should have brought a step ladder for the little girl," added Corporal Martinez, another vocal critic who had made Sarah's life miserable since day one. How's she going to climb over the obstacles when she can barely reach the top shelf at the grocery store? More laughter. Sarah's jaw clenched, but she maintained her composure. She had learned early in her military career that responding to these provocations only encouraged more harassment. Instead, she channeled her anger into motivation, using every insult as fuel for her determination to prove them wrong. The training facility sprawled across 50 acres of rugged terrain, complete with urban warfare simulations, obstacle courses, and live-fire ranges. Sarah had spent countless hours studying every inch of this place, memorizing the layout, and analyzing the tactical challenges each section presented. While her peers spent their free time in the recreation areas, she remained on the training grounds, pushing herself harder than anyone else. Captain Rodriguez, the training officer, emerged from the command building carrying a clipboard and wearing the expression of someone who had seen too many recruits fail to have much optimism left. His weathered face bore scars from his own combat experience, and his reputation for being impossibly demanding preceded him wherever he went. "Listen up." Rodriguez's voice cut through the morning air like a blade. "Today's assessment will test everything you've learned over the past 6 months. You'll face urban combat scenarios, wilderness survival challenges, tactical problem-solving exercises, and live-fire situations. Some of you will succeed. Most of you will fail. Those who fail will be on a transport back to your previous units before sunset." Sarah felt her heart rate increase. She had worked harder than anyone else to reach this point, but she knew that effort alone wouldn't be enough. The assessment was designed to break candidates mentally and physically, weeding out all but the most exceptional soldiers. "The first phase begins in 30 minutes, Rodriguez continued. "You'll be divided into teams of 4 and inserted into the urban warfare facility. Your mission is to locate and extract a high-value target while avoiding or neutralizing enemy forces. You'll be facing live opponents using simulation rounds, so expect real resistance." Thompson raised his hand. "Sir, what about team assignments? Some of us have been training together and know each other's capabilities." Rodriguez smiled coldly. "Teams have already been assigned randomly. No special requests, no switching. You'll work with whoever you're given, just like in real combat situations." Sarah's stomach dropped when she heard her team assignment. Thompson, Martinez, and a quiet soldier named Jackson would be her teammates for the first phase. She couldn't have been paired with 3 people less likely to cooperate with her if Rodriguez had deliberately tried to sabotage her chances. As the teams gathered their gear and prepared to move out, Sarah overheard Thompson talking to Martinez in low tones. "This is perfect," Thompson said with a cruel grin. "We'll have front row seats to watch the princess fail. Maybe she'll cry when the simulation rounds start flying." Should we even bother trying to work with her? Martinez asked. She's just going to slow us down and get us all marked as failures. We'll do what we have to do to pass, Thompson replied. If that means leaving dead weight behind, so be it. Sarah pretended not to hear the conversation, but every word cut deep. She had hoped that after 6 months of proving herself in training exercises, at least some of her peers would give her a chance. Instead, she faced not only the challenge of the assessment itself, but also the active hostility of her own teammates. Jackson, the fourth member of their team, hadn't spoken much during training. He was a methodical soldier who seemed to evaluate everything carefully before acting. Sarah hoped he might be more open-minded than the others, but his silence made it impossible to gauge his attitude toward her. The urban warfare facility was a maze of concrete buildings designed to simulate a hostile city environment. Multi-story structures, narrow alleyways, and hidden sniper positions created countless opportunities for ambush and tactical maneuvering. Sarah had studied the layout extensively, noting potential approach routes and defensive positions that might prove useful during the assessment. "All right, listen up," Thompson said as their team gathered at the insertion point. Without any discussion, he had assumed leadership of the group, a decision that neither Martinez nor Jackson challenged. The target building is approximately 800 meters northeast of here. We'll move fast and hard, using standard rune-clearing techniques. Sarah studied the map displayed on Thompson's tablet. The direct route takes us through the main avenue, where enemy snipers will have clear sight lines. If we approach from the south and use the abandoned warehouse district for cover, we could— "Nobody asked for your opinion, Princess," Thompson interrupted harshly. "We're doing this my way. You can either keep up or stay here and wait for us to complete the mission." Martinez nodded his agreement. Thompson knows what he's doing. He's got actual combat experience, unlike some people here. The dismissal stung, but Sarah recognized that arguing would only make the situation worse. She would have to prove her value through actions rather than words. As the team moved toward the urban facility, she mentally reviewed her own tactical plan, knowing that Thompson's direct approach would likely lead them into unnecessary danger. The simulation began with a loud horn blast that echoed across the training grounds. Thompson immediately led the team toward the main avenue, exactly as Sarah had predicted he would. Their boots pounded against the pavement as they advanced in a loose formation, Thompson and Martinez taking point while Jackson and Sarah follow behind. Sarah's training kicked in automatically. Her eyes scanned the buildings around them, looking for movement or the glint of weapon barrels and windows. She noticed several potential sniper positions that Thompson and Martinez had overlooked in their rush to reach the target building quickly. The first enemy contact came from exactly where Sarah had expected it. A simulation sniper opened fire from a third-story window, his laser-equipped rifle marking Thompson with a direct hit to the center of his tactical vest. In a real combat situation, Thompson would have been dead instantly. "Sniper!" Sarah shouted, simultaneously identifying the shooter's position and diving for cover behind a concrete barrier. "Third floor, northeast corner building." But it was too late for Thompson. The assessment rules were strict. Soldiers marked by simulation rounds were considered casualties and had to remain motionless where they fell. Thompson's aggressive leadership had lasted less than 5 minutes. Martinez cursed loudly as he scrambled for cover. "Where the hell did that come from?" Thompson said this route was clear. "I tried to warn about the sniper positions," Sarah said, keeping her voice level despite her frustration. The direct approach was always going to be dangerous. "Great," Martinez spat. "Now we're down a man because you couldn't speak up louder." Sarah bit back her response. She had tried to speak up, but Thompson had shut her down. Now, with their self-appointed leader eliminated, the team needed to regroup and develop a new strategy. Jackson finally spoke, his voice calm and analytical. "We need to reassess our approach. The enemy clearly has overwatch positions covering the main routes." "No kidding," Martinez replied sarcastically. "What do you suggest we do now, genius?" Sarah studied the tactical situation carefully. With Thompson eliminated, the team was already at a significant disadvantage. They needed to reach the target building while avoiding the remaining enemy positions, extract the high-value target, and return to the insertion point. Every minute they spent in the open increased their chances of being eliminated. There's a maintenance tunnel system that runs beneath this section of the facility, Sarah said, pointing to a utility access point near their position. If we can reach the tunnels, we can approach the target building from underneath and avoid the sniper overwatch entirely. Martinez looked skeptical. How do you know about tunnels? That wasn't in any of the briefing materials. I studied the facility blueprints during my free time, Sarah explained. The tunnels were built as part of the original construction, but aren't normally used during training exercises. That sounds like cheating, Martinez accused. We're supposed to use standard tactical approaches, not some secret knowledge you dug up. Jackson intervened before the argument could escalate. Using all available intelligence is part of effective tactical planning. If Chen identified resources that can help us complete the mission, we should consider using them. Sarah felt a surge of gratitude toward Jackson for his support. Finally, someone was willing to evaluate her suggestions based on their merit rather than dismissing them because of who she was. Fine, Martinez said reluctantly. But if this tunnel idea gets us lost or trapped underground, it's on you, Chun. The utility access point was located in an alley between two buildings, partially concealed by debris and overgrowth. Sarah had noticed it during her reconnaissance of the facility, but had never actually explored the tunnel system. She was confident that her understanding of the blueprints was accurate, but she knew that reality might present complications that hadn't been evident on paper. The access hatch was heavy and required all three remaining team members to lift it. As they descended into the darkness below, Sarah used her tactical flashlight to illuminate the concrete tunnel that stretched ahead of them. The air was stale and humid, and their footsteps echoed off the walls despite their attempts to move quietly. This better work, Martinez muttered as they made their way through the underground passage. If we get lost down here, we'll never complete the mission in time. Sarah consulted the compass on her tactical gear and compared their direction to her mental map of the tunnel system. According to her calculations, they needed to travel approximately 400 meters northeast to reach the area beneath the target building. The tunnels were more complex than the blueprints had indicated. Several branching passages led off in different directions, and Sarah had to make quick decisions about which route would lead them to their destination. Her confidence in her navigation skills was tested with each turn, but she pressed forward, knowing that hesitation would undermine the team's already fragile trust in her leadership. After 15 minutes of careful movement through the underground maze, Sarah spotted a vertical access shaft that matched the location she had been seeking. Light filtered down from above, indicating that they had reached the area near the target building. This should put us approximately 50 meters from the target, Sarah whispered. We can surface here and approach from the building's blind spot. Jackson nodded approvingly. Good navigation. That tunnel route avoided all the overwatch positions. Even Martinez seemed grudgingly impressed. All right, Chun, your tunnel idea worked. Now let's see if you can handle the next phase. As they prepared to ascend to street level, Sarah felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. She had successfully guided the team to their objective using unconventional tactics, but the most challenging part of the mission still lay ahead. They needed to infiltrate the target building, locate and extract the high-value target, and escape without being eliminated by the defending forces. The assessment had only just begun, but Sarah had already demonstrated that her contributions could be valuable to the team's success. Whether Martinez and Jackson would continue to accept her input remained to be seen, but she had taken the first step toward proving that she belonged in the Special Operations Program. As they climbed toward the surface, Sarah's mind was already working on the next phase of their mission. The target building would be defended, and they would need to use every tactical advantage available to them. Her extensive preparation and unconventional thinking had served them well so far, but the real test of her abilities was still to come. The access shaft ladder felt cold against Sarah's gloves as she climbed toward the surface, her heart pounding with a mixture of adrenaline and determination. Above her, She could hear the muffled sounds of the ongoing simulation, distant gunfire, shouted commands, and the occasional explosion of a flashbang grenade. Other teams were engaged in their own tactical scenarios throughout the facility, but Sarah's focus remained entirely on the mission at hand. She paused just below the surface access point, pressing her ear to the metal cover above her head. No immediate sounds of movement suggested that the area was clear, but she knew that enemy forces would be positioned to defend the target building. According to the mission briefing, the high-value target was being held on the third floor of a four-story office complex, guarded by an unknown number of hostile forces. Clear above, Sarah whispered down to Martinez and Jackson. No immediate threats detected. Martinez climbed up beside her, his bulky frame making the narrow shaft feel even more cramped. Despite his earlier skepticism about the tunnel approach, Sarah could see that he was beginning to view her with something approaching respect rather than outright dismissal. "What's our next move?" Martinez asked quietly. "We can't just storm the front entrance." Sarah had been considering their options during the underground journey. The target building was a standard office complex with multiple entry points, but most would be heavily defended or monitored. Their best chance of success lay in finding an approach that the defenders wouldn't expect. "The building has a service elevator that connects to the parking garage," Sarah explained, keeping her voice low. "If we can access the garage level, we might be able to reach the upper floors without going through the main defensive positions." Jackson nodded thoughtfully. The parking garage would be a logical blind spot in their defensive setup. Most teams would try to assault from ground level or attempt a direct breach. "Assuming we can reach the garage without being detected," Martinez added, "how do we know the service elevator will even be operational?" Sarah had considered this possibility as well. The facility managers want these simulations to be as realistic as possible. If the elevator is disabled, there will be maintenance stairs adjacent to the shaft. Either way, we have vertical access to the target floor. The three soldiers carefully emerged from the access shaft, finding themselves in a loading area behind a warehouse building approximately 40 meters from their objective. Sarah immediately began scanning for enemy positions while Martinez and Jackson secured their flanks. The target building loomed ahead of them, its windows dark except for a few rooms on the upper floors where defenders had positioned themselves to watch the approaches. Sarah counted at least 3 sniper positions covering the main entrances and several more defensive positions at ground level. "Movement on the second floor, northwest corner," Jackson reported quietly. "At least 2 defenders with overlapping fields of fire." Sarah studied the building's exterior, looking for weaknesses in the defensive setup. The parking garage entrance was located on the building's east side, partially concealed from the main sniper positions by a concrete support column. If they could reach that entrance without being detected, they would have a significant tactical advantage. "We need to move in stages," Sarah said, outlining her plan. "First, we reach that delivery truck about 20 meters ahead. From there, we can assess the garage entrance and time our approach to avoid the patrol patterns." Martinez looked skeptical. "You've been watching their patrol patterns? When did you have time to do that?" "While we were moving through the tunnels, I was listening to their communications," Sarah explained. "They're using standard radio protocol, and their patrol reports come every 3 minutes. We have a 90-second window between sweeps." Jackson smiled slightly. "Impressive situational awareness. Lead the way, Chun." The first bound to the delivery truck went smoothly. Sarah led the movement, using hand signals to coordinate their advance while maintaining visual contact with the known sniper positions. Her months of training had taught her to move with economy and precision, and she felt confident in her ability to avoid detection. As they crouched behind the truck, Sarah checked her watch and listened for the next patrol report. Right on schedule, a voice crackled over the enemy radio frequency. "Sector 4 clear, continuing patrol pattern Alpha." 90 seconds, Sarah whispered. "Move fast but stay low." The sprint to the parking garage entrance tested every bit of speed and agility Sarah possessed. She reached the cover of the concrete support column with seconds to spare, followed closely by Martinez and Jackson. None of the defenders had spotted their movement, and they were now positioned to access the building's most vulnerable entry point. The parking garage was dimly lit and filled with civilian vehicles that provided excellent concealment. Sarah led the team through the maze of cars and concrete pillars, moving toward the service elevator she had identified on the building blueprints. Her navigation skills were proving invaluable once again. There, Sarah pointed to a metal door marked "Authorized Personnel Only," located near the back wall of the garage. That should be our access point to the service elevator. Martinez tested the door handle and found it unlocked. Either they forgot to secure this entrance, or it's a trap. Only one way to find out, Jackson replied pragmatically. The service corridor beyond the door was narrow and utilitarian, lined with pipes and electrical conduits that hummed quietly in the confined space. Sarah could hear the mechanical sounds of the elevator system operating somewhere above them, indicating that the equipment was indeed functional. As they approached the elevator doors, Sarah noticed something that made her pause. Fresh scuff marks on the floor suggested that other people had used this route recently. Either the facility maintenance staff had been working in the area, or the defending forces had anticipated that attackers might try to use the service access. "Wait," Sarah held up her hand, stopping Martinez just as he reached for the elevator call button. "Something's not right here." She knelt down to examine the floor more carefully, using her tactical flashlight to illuminate the scuff marks. The pattern was wrong for maintenance workers. These marks had been made by tactical boots, and they led directly to the elevator doors. "Ambush," Sarah concluded quietly. "They've got people positioned above the elevator shaft or in the stairwell adjacent to it." Martinez cursed under his breath. So much for the easy route. What now? Sarah's mind raced through alternative options. The service elevator was compromised, but the building had to have other vertical access points. Fire escape stairs, maintenance ladders, or even the main elevator system might provide alternative routes to the target floor. The blueprints showed emergency stairs on the north side of the building, Sarah said. If we can backtrack through the garage and access those stairs from the outside, we might be able to avoid the ambush. That means going back into the open, Jackson pointed out. The sniper positions will have visual coverage of the north side approach. Sarah studied the tactical problem from every angle she could think of. They needed to reach the third floor to extract the high-value target, but every obvious route was either compromised or heavily defended. The solution would require thinking beyond conventional assault tactics. What if we don't try to avoid the snipers? Sarah asked suddenly. What if we use them to our advantage? Martinez looked confused. Come again? How do we use enemy snipers to our advantage? Misdirection, Sarah explained, her plan taking shape as she spoke. We create a diversion that draws their attention to one side of the building while we assault from the opposite direction. If we can make them think a large force is approaching from the east, they'll reposition their defenses to counter that threat. Jackson was beginning to understand. You're suggesting we sacrifice our stealth advantage to create tactical confusion. Exactly. We use the garage's fire alarm system to create noise and movement that suggests multiple teams converging on the east side entrances. While the defenders are repositioning to counter that threat, we assault from the west side using the emergency stairs. Martinez shook his head. That's a huge risk. If the diversion doesn't work, we'll be caught in the open with no cover and no element of surprise. The current plan isn't working either, Sarah pointed out. Every conventional approach is compromised. We need to do something they won't expect. Jackson weighed the options carefully. Chen's right. We're running out of time, and every minute we spend trying to find a safe route reduces our chances of mission success. Sometimes the unconventional approach is the only viable option. Sarah felt a surge of gratitude toward Jackson for supporting her idea, even though it represented a significant tactical risk. Martinez still looked uncertain, but he seemed to recognize that they had few alternatives remaining. All right, Martinez said finally. But if this goes sideways, we're all getting marked as casualties. Sarah accepted the responsibility that came with her tactical decision. I'll take point on the assault. If anyone's going to get eliminated by enemy fire, it should be the person whose plan we're following. The fire alarm system was located near the garage's main entrance, and Sarah was able to activate it without difficulty. Immediately, loud bells began ringing throughout the building, and she could hear radio traffic as the defending forces tried to determine whether the alarm indicated a real emergency or a tactical diversion. "All units, sound off," came a voice over the enemy communications. "Possible breach in progress. Sector unknown." Sarah smiled grimly. The alarm had created exactly the confusion she had hoped for. Now, they needed to capitalize on that confusion before the defenders figured out what was really happening. The trio moved quickly through the parking garage and back toward the building's exterior. Sarah could see defenders moving past the windows as they repositioned to investigate the alarm, leaving their original positions temporarily unguarded. The emergency stairs on the building's west side were accessed through a heavy metal door marked "Emergency Exit Only." Sarah tested the handle and found it locked, but the lock was a standard commercial deadbolt rather than a high-security system. "Jackson, can you handle the lock?" Sarah asked. Jackson produced a small toolkit from his tactical vest and went to work on the deadbolt. His lock-picking skills were evidently among the specialized talents that had earned him a place in the Special Operations Program. Within 30 seconds, he had the door open. "After you," Jackson said with a slight smile. The emergency stairwell was narrow and poorly lit, but it provided the vertical access they needed to reach the target floor. Sarah led the climb, taking the steps two at a time while listening for any sounds that might indicate enemy presence above them. As they reached the second-floor landing, Sarah could hear voices coming from the floors above. The defending forces were definitely active in the building, but they seemed to be focused on the east side where the fire alarm had originated. "Third floor should be just ahead," Sarah whispered. "Remember, we need to locate the high-value target and extract him without eliminating any friendly forces or civilians." The mission parameters were designed to test not only combat effectiveness, but also judgment and restraint. Soldiers who fired on non-combatants or failed to properly identify their targets would be immediately failed, regardless of their other performance metrics. At the third-floor landing, Sarah paused to listen at the door that led into the main building. She could hear movement in the corridor beyond, but couldn't determine whether the sounds came from defenders or other personnel. "On my mark," Sarah said quietly, gripping her weapon and preparing to breach the doorway. "We go in fast, assess the situation, and locate the target. Rules of engagement are defensive only unless directly threatened." Martinez and Jackson positioned themselves behind Sarah, weapons ready, but pointed in safe directions until they could evaluate the tactical situation. Sarah took a deep breath, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether her unconventional tactics had been brilliant or disastrous. She pushed open the stairwell door and immediately assessed the corridor beyond. 3 doors led off the hallway, and she could see movement behind the frosted glass of what appeared to be an office suite at the far end. No immediate threats were visible, but Sarah maintained her weapon at the ready position. "Movement in the far office," she reported quietly. "Unknown contacts, no hostile indicators observed." The team moved down the corridor with tactical precision, checking each room systematically while maintaining security in all directions. Sarah's training had emphasized the importance of methodical clearing procedures, and she applied those lessons now with careful attention to detail. The office suite at the end of the hallway contained their objective. Through the glass doors, Sarah could see a man in civilian clothes sitting at a desk, while 2 defenders positioned themselves near the windows. The high-value target appeared unharmed and was not restrained, suggesting that this was a simulation scenario rather than a hostage situation. "Target identified," Sarah whispered into her radio. 2 defenders present. Rules of engagement apply. Now came the most challenging part of the mission. They needed to extract the target without harming him or engaging in unnecessary combat with the defending forces. Sarah's mind worked through several approaches, looking for a solution that would satisfy the mission parameters while keeping her team safe. Sarah studied the tactical situation through the frosted glass of the office suite, analyzing every detail that might influence their approach. The 2 defenders were positioned near opposite windows, giving them overlapping fields of fire that covered the main entrance to the office. The high-value target sat at a desk in the center of the room, apparently working on a laptop computer as if this were a normal business day. The simulation scenario was more complex than a simple extraction. The defenders weren't holding the target against his will. They were protecting him from potential threats. This meant that any approach would need to account for the possibility that the defenders might be friendly forces rather than hostile combatants. This could be a test of our identification protocols, Sarah whispered to Martinez and Jackson. We need to determine whether those defenders are friendlies or hostiles before we make any tactical moves. Jackson nodded, understanding the implications. If we assault friendly forces, we fail the mission regardless of whether we extract the target. Martinez looked frustrated by the complexity of the scenario. How are we supposed to make that determination without revealing our position? Sarah had been thinking about this problem as well. The mission briefing had mentioned that high-value targets might be under protective custody by friendly forces, requiring extraction teams to use proper identification procedures before taking action. This was a common challenge in real-world operations where the tactical situation might not be immediately clear. We need to observe their behavior patterns, Sarah suggested. Hostile forces would be more alert and aggressive in their positioning. Friendly forces protecting a VIP would be focused primarily on external threats. The three soldiers spent several minutes watching the defenders through the glass. Their body language and positioning gradually revealed important clues about their role in the scenario. Both men maintained disciplined defensive postures, but their attention was focused entirely on the windows and external approaches rather than on the target himself. They're definitely protective detail, Jackson concluded. Look at how they're positioning themselves relative to the target. They're creating a defensive perimeter, not a containment system. Sarah agreed with Jackson's assessment, which means we need to approach this as a coordination mission rather than an assault. We have to identify ourselves and request cooperation in the target extraction. Great, Martinez muttered. So instead of a straightforward tactical problem, we're dealing with bureaucracy and protocol. Sarah understood Martinez's frustration, but she also recognized that this type of complex scenario was exactly what separated special operations personnel from conventional infantry soldiers. The ability to adapt tactics based on changing intelligence and mission parameters was a crucial skill that would be tested repeatedly throughout their careers. I'll make initial contact, Sarah decided. You two provide overwatch, and be ready to respond if the situation goes sideways. Martinez looked surprised. You're taking point on the diplomatic approach? No offense, Chun, but you're not exactly known for your people skills. The comment stung, but Sarah recognized that Martinez had a valid point. Her interactions with fellow soldiers had been largely negative due to the harassment she had endured during training. However, she also knew that her technical knowledge and attention to detail might be valuable in navigating the protocol requirements of the scenario. I've studied the identification procedures more thoroughly than most people, Sarah replied. If this is a test of our ability to follow proper protocol, I'm the most likely to get it right. Jackson supported her decision. Chen's been right about everything else so far. Let's trust her judgment on this one, too. Sarah approached the office door carefully, keeping her weapon in a non-threatening position while preparing to identify herself according to military protocol. She knocked twice on the glass, using a pattern that would signal friendly forces without alarming potential hostiles. United States Army Special Operations Command, Sarah announced clearly, requesting permission to enter for official business. One of the defenders immediately moved toward the door, while the other maintained his position near the window. The man who approached was a staff sergeant with airborne insignia on his uniform, clearly experienced and professional in his demeanor. Identify yourself and state your business, the staff sergeant demanded through the glass. Sarah provided her identification and explained their mission parameters. Lieutenant Chun, conducting training exercise 77 Alpha. We're tasked with extracting the designated high-value target for security purposes. The staff sergeant studied Sarah's identification through the glass, then consulted a tablet computer that presumably contained information about the training scenario. After a moment, he unlocked the door and stepped aside to allow the extraction team to enter. Target extraction authorized, the staff sergeant confirmed. You have 15 minutes to complete the evacuation before enemy forces locate this position. Sarah felt a surge of relief. Her careful attention to protocol had paid off, avoiding a potentially disastrous confrontation with friendly forces. Martinez and Jackson entered the office behind her, maintaining professional bearing despite the successful resolution of a complex tactical challenge. The high-value target proved to be a civilian contractor who had been briefed on his role in the training scenario. He was cooperative but insisted on retrieving some sensitive document from his laptop before leaving the building. This added another layer of complexity to the extraction, as they would need to ensure the security of both the person and the information he carried. How long will it take you to secure those documents? Sarah asked the contractor. 3 or 4 minutes, he replied. But I need to use a secure upload protocol that requires an active internet connection. Sarah realized that this detail had been included in the scenario to test their ability to balance speed with security requirements. Simply grabbing the target and running would result in the loss of valuable intelligence, but remaining in place too long would expose them to enemy forces. Can you continue the upload process while we move? Sarah asked. We need to begin the extraction immediately. The contractor nodded. I have a mobile hotspot device that should maintain connectivity during movement. As long as we don't encounter too much interference, the upload should complete en route. Sarah's mind immediately began working on an extraction route that would minimize signal interference while avoiding the defensive positions they had identified earlier. The path they had used to reach the building would work in reverse, but they would need to account for the possibility that enemy forces had adjusted their positions during the intervening time. We'll use the same route we took to get here, Sarah explained to Martinez and Jackson. Emergency stairs to the parking garage, then through the tunnel system back to the extraction point. The contractor will need physical support during movement to maintain his internet connection. The staff sergeant who had authorized their entry provided additional intelligence about enemy movement in the area. Be advised that hostile forces have been probing the building's perimeter for the past 10 minutes. They've identified some of your approach routes and may have positioned assets to intercept your withdrawal. This information confirmed Sarah's suspicion that their extraction would be more challenging than their infiltration had been. Enemy forces had time to adapt their tactics and potentially set up ambush positions along the routes that the extraction team had used previously. Any suggestions for alternative routes? Sarah asked the staff sergeant. The building has a service tunnel that connects to the municipal storm drain system, he replied. It's not marked on most building plans, but it provides access to several blocks away from here. Sarah was intrigued by this option, but she also recognized that using unfamiliar routes carried significant risks. Getting lost underground with a high-value target would be a mission failure, just as certainly as walking into an enemy ambush. Do you have a map of the storm drain system? Sarah asked. The staff sergeant produced a waterproof map case from his gear. This shows the major tunnels and access points. It's not comprehensive, but it should be enough to get you to a safe extraction point. Sarah studied the map carefully, tracing potential routes from their current location to various exit points throughout the area. The storm drain system was more extensive than she had imagined, with multiple branches and connections that could provide excellent concealment during their withdrawal. This could work, Sarah concluded. The main tunnel runs parallel to the route we used to get here, but it emerges several blocks away where enemy forces are less likely to be positioned. Martinez examined the map over Sarah's shoulder. Assuming we don't get lost or trapped underground, these tunnels could flood if there's any precipitation. Sarah checked the weather conditions on her tactical display. Clear skies were forecast for the remainder of the day, eliminating the immediate risk of flash flooding. The storm drain system represented their best chance of avoiding enemy forces during the extraction phase. We'll use the storm drains, Sarah decided. Martinez, you take point during movement. Jackson, you're responsible for protecting the contractor. I'll handle navigation and maintain rear security." The extraction began immediately. The contractor had completed his document upload and was ready to move, carrying only essential equipment in a small backpack. Sarah led the team back to the emergency stairwell, but instead of descending to the parking garage, they continued down to the building's basement level where the staff sergeant had indicated they would find access to the storm drain system. The basement was a maze of mechanical equipment and storage areas, dimly lit by emergency lighting that cast strange shadows on the concrete walls. Sarah used her tactical flashlight to navigate through the maze, following the staff sergeant's directions toward the service tunnel entrance. The entrance to the storm drain system was hidden behind a maintenance panel that required tools to open. Jackson's lock-picking skills proved useful once again as he worked to remove the fasteners that secured the panel. Within a few minutes, they had gained access to the underground tunnel system. The storm drains were larger than Sarah had expected, with concrete passages that stood nearly 6 feet high and wide enough for 2 people to walk side by side. Water flowed along the bottom of the tunnel in a shallow channel, but elevated walkways on both sides provided dry footing for their movement. "Stay on the walkways," Sarah instructed as they entered the tunnel system. The water might look shallow, but it could hide obstacles or unstable surfaces. The contractor proved to be in better physical condition than his desk job appearance had suggested. He kept pace with the soldiers without complaint, though Sarah could see that he was working hard to maintain the speed of their movement. As they progressed through the tunnel system, Sarah periodically checked their position against the map and adjusted their route as necessary. The underground passages were disorienting, with numerous branches and junctions that could easily confuse anyone unfamiliar with the layout. After 20 minutes of movement through the tunnels, they reached an access ladder that would bring them to street level approximately 4 blocks from the target building. Sarah climbed the ladder first, carefully lifting the manhole cover to check for enemy presence in the area above. The street was clear of immediate threats, but Sarah could hear radio traffic indicating that enemy forces were conducting active patrols in the vicinity. Their extraction was taking place in the heart of hostile territory, and any mistake could result in contact with superior enemy forces. "Area appears clear," Sarah reported quietly. "But we need to move fast to reach the extraction point before enemy patrols locate us." The final phase of their mission required a careful balance between speed and stealth. They needed to cover 6 blocks of urban terrain while avoiding enemy patrols and delivering the high-value targets safely to the designated extraction point. Sarah's unconventional tactics had successfully brought them this far, but the most dangerous part of their mission still lay ahead. Enemy forces would be actively searching for them, and any encounter would likely result in a firefight that could compromise their entire mission. As they emerged from the storm drain system and began their final approach to the extraction point, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility for her team's success. Her tactical decisions had worked so far, but she knew that special operations missions often succeeded or failed based on the soldiers' performance during the final critical moments. The morning air felt crisp against Sarah's face as she emerged from the storm drain system, her senses immediately heightening as she scanned the urban environment for potential threats. 6 blocks of hostile territory lay between their current position and the extraction point, and every step would require careful coordination between tactical awareness and operational speed. The contractor, whose name Sarah had learned was Dr. Marcus Webb, adjusted his backpack and checked his mobile device to ensure that his document upload had completed successfully during their underground transit. Despite being a civilian, he had adapted well to the military pace and procedures, following instructions without complaint or unnecessary questions. "Upload complete," Dr. Webb reported quietly. "All sensitive materials have been secured." Sarah felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that they had accomplished both primary objectives of their mission, protecting the high-value target and preserving critical intelligence. However, mission success would only be official once they delivered Dr. Webb to the extraction point safely. Martinez took point as they began moving through the urban environment, using tactical movement techniques to advance from cover to cover while avoiding open areas where enemy observation might detect them. Sarah maintained rear security, periodically checking behind them for signs of pursuit, while monitoring enemy radio communications for intelligence about patrol movements. The enemy forces were conducting systematic searches of the area, working outward from the target building in expanding circles. Sarah could hear their communications becoming more urgent as time passed without contact, indicating that the opposition was under pressure to locate and engage the extraction team. Bravo team, report status on Sector 7 sweep. Came a voice over the enemy radio frequency. Sector 7 negative contact. Moving to Sector 8 per patrol schedule. Sarah quickly calculated the enemy patrol patterns based on their radio reports. Sector 8 would bring them dangerously close to the route that her team was using toward the extraction point. They would need to adjust their approach or find concealment until the patrol passed through their area. Enemy patrol approaching from the northeast, Sarah reported to her team. Estimate contact in 3 minutes at current movement rate. Jackson identified a construction site that could provide temporary concealment. Scaffolding and equipment over there should hide us from visual observation. The team quickly moved into the construction site, using stacked building materials and heavy machinery to break up their silhouettes. Dr. Webb proved surprisingly adept at finding effective concealment, selecting a position that kept him hidden while maintaining mobility for quick movement when the situation allowed. The enemy patrol consisted of 4 soldiers moving in a tactical formation, checking likely hiding places and maintaining radio contact with their command element. Sarah watched them through a gap in the construction materials, noting their procedures and equipment while estimating their capabilities. These were well-trained soldiers following sound tactical doctrine. Their movement was disciplined and their communication was professional, suggesting that the opposing forces in this training scenario represented elite units rather than conventional infantry. This realization reinforced Sarah's conviction that unconventional tactics had been necessary for mission success. Clear on the northwest approach. One of the enemy soldiers reported over the radio. Continuing patrol pattern Alpha. Sarah waited until the patrol had moved well beyond their position before signaling her team to resume movement. The encounter had cost them valuable time, but it had also provided useful intelligence about enemy capabilities and patrol patterns that might prove valuable during the remainder of their extraction. As they continued toward the extraction point, Sarah noticed that the urban environment was gradually changing character. The office buildings and commercial structures near the target building were giving way to residential neighborhoods with different tactical considerations. Houses and apartments provided more concealment opportunities, but also more potential observation points where enemy forces might be positioned. 2 blocks to extraction point, Sarah reported. Terrain is shifting to residential area with increased complexity. Martinez acknowledged the terrain change and adjusted his movement techniques accordingly. Instead of using vehicles and large structures for concealment, he began utilizing fences, landscaping, and residential architecture to mask their approach. The extraction point was located in a small park that provided helicopter landing space while offering multiple approach routes from different directions. Sarah could see the designated landing zone ahead of them, marked by an orange smoke grenade that indicated the arrival of their extraction aircraft. However, as they approached the park, Sarah detected something that made her immediately signal for the team to take cover. Enemy soldiers were positioned around the perimeter of the extraction zone, apparently having anticipated that this location would be used for extraction purposes. Ambush positions around the landing zone, Sarah whispered into her radio. Count at least 6 enemy personnel with overwatch on all approaches. Martinez cursed under his breath. They figured out our extraction point and got here ahead of us. How are we supposed to get past 6 defenders in open terrain? Sarah studied the tactical situation carefully. The enemy had positioned themselves well, with overlapping fields of fire that covered all obvious approaches to the landing zone. Any direct assault would result in the extraction team being eliminated before they could reach the helicopter. However, Sarah noticed that the enemy positioning was focused on preventing approach from the surrounding streets and buildings. They had not anticipated that an extraction team might already be in close proximity to the landing zone when the aircraft arrived. They're defending against external approach, Sarah observed. They're not expecting us to already be inside their perimeter. Jackson understood the implications. If we can get inside their defensive positions before making our move, we might be able to reach the landing zone before they can react. That requires getting past their observation posts without being detected, Martinez pointed out. Not easy with a civilian in tow. Sarah examined the park layout and identified a potential solution. Storm drain outlets were visible at several points around the park's perimeter, suggesting that the underground tunnel system they had used earlier extended into this area as well. The storm drains connect to this area, Sarah said, pointing to the nearest outlet. If we can access the tunnel system from here, we might be able to emerge directly in the landing zone. Dr. Webb looked concerned about another underground transit. How long would that take? The helicopter won't wait indefinitely if we're not at the extraction point on schedule. Sarah checked the mission timeline on her tactical display. They had approximately 8 minutes before the extraction aircraft would depart, with or without them. The underground approach will be cutting their timing very close, but it appeared to be their only viable option. We can make it, Sarah decided, but we'll need to move fast and hope the tunnel layout cooperates with us. The nearest storm drain access was located beneath a bridge that crossed a small creek running through the park. Sarah led the team to the access point, using the bridge structure to conceal their movement from enemy observation posts. The storm drain entrance was partially concealed by vegetation and debris, requiring them to clear the opening before they could enter. As Sarah worked to remove the obstructions, she could hear the approaching sound of helicopter rotors in the distance. Transport inbound, Jackson reported. Estimate 2 minutes to landing. Sarah felt her heart rate increase as the time pressure mounted. They needed to traverse an unknown length of tunnel, emerge in the correct location, and signal the helicopter crew, all within the next few minutes. The tunnel system beneath the park was smaller than the passages they had used earlier, requiring them to move in single file through confined spaces. Sarah led the way with her tactical flashlight, moving as quickly as safety allowed while Dr. Webb and the other soldiers followed behind her. 70 meters, Sarah estimated, calculating their progress based on the distance they needed to cover. Should be approaching the center of the park. Above them, the sound of helicopter rotors grew louder as the extraction aircraft approached the landing zone. Sarah could also hear shouted commands as enemy forces repositioned to engage the helicopter, apparently believing that their quarry would approach from outside the park perimeter. Sarah found a vertical access shaft that should emerge near the designated extraction point. She climbed quickly toward the surface, pausing just below the opening to listen for immediate threats. The sounds of the helicopter were very loud now, suggesting that the aircraft was either landing or preparing to land. Movement below came a voice from directly above the access shaft. Check the storm drains. Sarah's blood ran cold as she realized that enemy forces had identified their approach route. She was trapped in the vertical shaft with her team below her and hostile soldiers above, with only seconds remaining before the extraction window closed. Without hesitation, Sarah pushed the cover aside and emerged from the access shaft, her weapon ready but pointed in a safe direction. The enemy soldier, standing over the shaft, was clearly surprised by her sudden appearance, hesitating for a crucial moment as he tried to process what was happening. "Friendly forces," Sarah shouted, using the confusion to her advantage. Extraction team coming up. The enemy soldier's training kicked in, but his moment of hesitation had given Sarah the tactical advantage she needed. She was out of the shaft and in a covered position before he could bring his weapon to bear, and Martinez emerged behind her to provide additional firepower. "Go, go, go," Sarah shouted to Dr. Webb and Jackson as they emerged from the tunnel system. The extraction helicopter was on the ground with its rotors turning, the crew chief waving frantically for the extraction team to board immediately. Enemy forces around the park perimeter were converging on their position, but the confusion caused by their unexpected emergence had disrupted the defensive coordination. Sarah provided covering fire as her team, and Dr. Webb sprinted toward the helicopter. Simulation rounds impacted around them as enemy forces engaged, but the short distance and element of surprise worked in their favor. Within seconds, all 4 members of the extraction team were aboard the aircraft and lifting off from the landing zone. As the helicopter climbed away from the park, Sarah looked down at the enemy forces who had nearly succeeded in preventing their extraction. Their tactical positioning had been sound, but they had failed to account for the unconventional approach that Sarah's team had used to penetrate their defensive perimeter. Mission accomplished, the helicopter crew chief announced over the intercom. Target extracted successfully with 0 friendly casualties. Sarah felt a surge of pride and relief. Her tactical decisions throughout the mission had proven effective, from the tunnel approach to avoid sniper positions, through the diplomatic contact with friendly forces, to the final underground penetration of the extraction zone defenses. Martinez was grinning as he removed his tactical gear. "Chun, I owe you an apology. Your unconventional thinking saved our mission multiple times today." Jackson nodded his agreement. "Outstanding tactical leadership under pressure. You kept us moving forward when conventional approaches weren't working." Dr. Webb, despite being a civilian, offered his own assessment. "In my experience working with military units, the best soldiers are the ones who can adapt their thinking to match changing circumstances. You demonstrated that ability repeatedly today." As the helicopter transported them back to the main facility, Sarah reflected on the day's events. She had proven to herself and to her teammates that she belonged in the Special Operations Program, but more importantly, she had gained confidence in her own tactical judgment and leadership abilities. However, the training assessment was far from over. This had been only the first phase of a multi-day evaluation that would test every aspect of their military capabilities. Sarah knew that her success today would mean nothing if she failed the challenges that lay ahead. But for the first time since joining the program, Sarah felt genuinely optimistic about her chances of success. She had found her voice as a tactical leader and had earned the respect of soldiers who had previously dismissed her as inadequate. Whatever challenges the assessment presented next, she would face them with the confidence that came from proven achievement under pressure. The helicopter touched down at the main training facility as the sun reached its zenith, casting harsh shadows across the concrete landing pad. Sarah felt her legs shake slightly as she disembarked, the adrenaline from the morning's mission beginning to subside and leave her with a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. She had successfully completed the first phase of the assessment, but she knew that Captain Rodriguez and his evaluation team would not give her time to rest on her accomplishments. Dr. Webb was escorted away by facility staff for his debriefing, but not before shaking hands with each member of the extraction team. "Outstanding work," he told Sarah specifically. "Your tactical thinking made the difference today." As Sarah walked toward the equipment turn-in area, she noticed that several other teams were already returning from their missions. Some looked triumphant, others appeared dejected, and a few were missing members, indicating that those soldiers had been eliminated during their scenarios and were already on transport back to their original units. Thompson was among the eliminated, his failure during the sniper encounter having cost him any chance of continuing in the program. Sarah felt no satisfaction in seeing her tormentor's dreams ended, but she couldn't deny a sense of vindication. His aggressive confidence had proven less valuable than her careful preparation and tactical flexibility. "Chun," Captain Rodriguez's voice cut across the staging area like a blade. "Report to the briefing room in 10 minutes. Phase 2 begins immediately." Sarah felt her stomach clench. She had hoped for at least a brief rest period between assessment phases, but the Special Operations Program was designed to test soldiers under continuous stress. Real combat missions didn't pause for convenience, and neither would this evaluation. In the equipment turn-in area, Sarah quickly cleaned and returned her weapons and gear while mentally preparing herself for whatever challenge would come next. Martinez, and Jackson were also preparing for Phase 2, their earlier skepticism about her abilities replaced by genuine respect and camaraderie. "Whatever they throw at us next," Martinez said as he checked his replacement equipment, "I'm glad to have you on the team." Jackson nodded in agreement. "Your tactical thinking kept us all in the program. We won't forget that." Sarah appreciated their support, but she also knew that each phase of the assessment would present new challenges that might require different skills and approaches. Success in the urban warfare scenario didn't guarantee success in whatever trials lay ahead. The briefing room was filled with the remaining candidates, their numbers noticeably reduced from the morning's starting group. Sarah estimated that approximately half of the original soldiers had been eliminated during the first phase, leaving only the most capable and adaptable personnel to continue the assessment. Captain Rodriguez entered the room carrying a stack of folders and wearing the same stern expression that had intimidated candidates for months. Behind him walked Colonel Morrison, the commanding officer of the entire Special Operations Training Program, a legendary figure whose reputation preceded him throughout the military. Colonel Morrison was a compact man in his 50s, his weathered face bearing the scars of multiple combat deployments, and his eyes holding the sharp intelligence that had earned him his position. Sarah had only seen him from a distance during previous training events, and his presence in the briefing room suggested that Phase 2 would be significantly more challenging than the morning's urban warfare exercise. "Congratulations on completing Phase 1, Colonel Morrison said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "You've demonstrated basic tactical competence under pressure. Phase 2 will test something more important: your ability to function as individual operators when separated from team support." Sarah felt a chill of apprehension. The urban warfare phase had succeeded largely because of teamwork and shared tactical thinking. Individual challenges would remove that support structure and force each candidate to rely entirely on their own capabilities. "You will be inserted individually into a wilderness survival scenario," Colonel Morrison continued. "Each of you will have different objectives, different challenges, and different resources. Some of you will be required to evade pursuit, while others will conduct reconnaissance or establish communications with friendly forces." The colonel gestured toward a large map displayed on the wall behind him. "The exercise area covers approximately 50 square miles of mountainous terrain. Weather conditions are currently adverse, with temperatures below freezing and intermittent snow showers expected throughout the day." Sarah studied the map, noting the contour lines that indicated steep terrain and the absence of roads or significant infrastructure within the exercise area. This would be a true wilderness survival challenge, requiring not only tactical skills, but also the physical and mental resilience to operate alone in harsh conditions. "You'll be equipped with basic survival gear and a radio for emergency communications only," Captain Rodriguez added. "Use of the emergency radio for any purpose other than life-threatening situations will result in immediate failure and removal from the program." Individual folders were distributed to each candidate, containing their specific mission parameters and insertion coordinates. Sarah opened her folder with trembling fingers, reading the instructions that would determine her fate in the Special Operations Program. Her mission was complex and demanding. She would be inserted at the northern edge of the exercise area with instructions to locate and photograph a series of checkpoint markers while avoiding capture by hunter-killer teams that would be actively pursuing all candidates. The mission had to be completed within 12 hours, and she would need to reach a designated extraction point before the deadline. Sarah studied the tactical situation carefully. The hunter-killer teams would be using tracking dogs and thermal imaging equipment to locate candidates, making concealment extremely difficult. The checkpoints were positioned to require extensive movement across open terrain, increasing her exposure to detection. Weather conditions would make travel dangerous, but might also provide concealment from thermal imaging. As candidates filed out of the briefing room to collect their gear and prepare for insertion, Sarah overheard conversations that revealed the diversity of challenges that each soldier would face. Some were tasked with establishing communication relays. Others needed to conduct reconnaissance of specific targets. And several were required to reach extraction points while carrying simulated wounded personnel. The gear issued for Phase 2 was minimal: basic cold weather clothing, a sleeping bag rated for freezing temperatures, minimal food rations for 24 hours, water purification tablets, a compass, a topographic map of the exercise area, and a camera for documenting checkpoint visits. No weapons were provided, emphasizing that this phase would test survival and evasion skills rather than combat capabilities. Sarah had always been confident in her wilderness survival abilities. Growing up in rural Montana had taught her to read terrain and weather conditions, while her military training had reinforced those skills with formal instruction in land navigation and fieldcraft. However, she had never faced the combination of hostile pursuit and mission objectives under these conditions. The helicopter insertion was conducted in pairs, with candidates being dropped at different locations throughout the exercise area. Sarah shared the flight with a soldier she barely knew, a quiet man named Peterson who had rarely spoken during the 6 months of training. They exchanged polite conversation during the flight, but both were clearly focused on their individual challenges rather than building camaraderie. Sarah's insertion point was a small clearing surrounded by dense forest, located approximately 8 miles from her first checkpoint. The helicopter crew chief confirmed her coordinates and wished her luck before the aircraft lifted off, leaving her alone in the wilderness with only her basic gear and her own capabilities. The silence that followed the helicopter's departure was profound. Sarah had experienced wilderness solitude before, but never while knowing that trained hunter-killer teams were actively pursuing her. Every sound in the forest could indicate approaching danger, and every decision about movement and concealment could determine success or failure. Sarah immediately established her tactical priorities: locate the first checkpoint while avoiding detection, then plan a route to the remaining objectives that minimized exposure to pursuit. The mission required covering approximately 20 miles of mountainous terrain within 12 hours, a challenging pace under normal conditions, but potentially impossible while evading active pursuit. The first checkpoint was located on a ridgeline approximately 3 miles southeast of her insertion point. The most direct route would take her through a valley that offered concealment, but also created a natural funnel where pursuit teams might establish ambush positions. The alternative route along the ridge would provide better observation and faster movement, but would expose her to detection from greater distances. Sarah chose a compromise approach, moving through the forest parallel to the valley floor while maintaining enough elevation to observe potential threats below. The terrain was challenging, with steep slopes and loose rock that required careful attention to avoid falls or noise that might reveal her position. After 2 hours of careful movement, Sarah reached the vicinity of the first checkpoint. The marker was positioned on an exposed outcropping that provided excellent views of the surrounding area, but no concealment for anyone attempting to photograph it. Sarah spent 20 minutes observing the area through binoculars, looking for any signs of hunter-killer teams or surveillance equipment. The area appeared clear, but Sarah knew that appearance could be deceiving. She approached the checkpoint using a route that provided multiple escape options if she encountered pursuit, moving slowly and carefully to avoid detection. The marker was a simple metal post with a numbered plaque, easily photographed with a digital camera she carried. As Sarah documented the first checkpoint, she heard the distant sound of helicopters in the area. The hunter-killer teams were beginning their pursuit operations, using aircraft to insert tracking teams at strategic locations throughout the exercise area. Sarah's window of relative safety was closing rapidly. The second checkpoint was located approximately 6 miles to the southwest, requiring movement across a large open area where concealment would be minimal. Sarah studied her options carefully, recognizing that daylight movement across open terrain would be extremely risky once the pursuit teams were fully deployed. Instead of attempting immediate movement toward the second checkpoint, Sarah decided to establish a concealed observation post where she could monitor hunter-killer team activities while planning her next movements. A cluster of large boulders near the ridgeline provided excellent concealment, while offering views of the valleys below. From her observation post, Sarah could see helicopter insertions at several locations throughout the exercise area. The hunter-killer teams were being positioned to cover likely movement routes between checkpoints, exactly as she had anticipated. Direct movement between objectives would be nearly impossible once the pursuit teams were fully established. However, Sarah also noticed that the helicopter insertions were following predictable patterns based on conventional tactical thinking. The pursuit teams were being positioned to cover valleys, ridgelines, and other terrain features that offered obvious movement routes. They were not accounting for the possibility that candidates might use more unconventional approaches. Sarah identified a route that would take her along a series of drainage gullies that were too narrow for helicopter insertion, but provided concealment for foot movement. The route was longer and more difficult than direct approaches, but it offered the best chance of avoiding detection while moving toward her remaining objectives. As afternoon shadows began to lengthen, Sarah began her movement toward the second checkpoint. The drainage gullies provided excellent concealment, but required careful navigation to avoid getting lost in the maze of intersecting channels. Sarah used her compass and map constantly, checking her position and adjusting her route as terrain features became visible. The second checkpoint was located in a different type of terrain, a wooded area near a small stream, where the marker was concealed among dense vegetation. Sarah approached carefully, using the sound of running water to mask her movement while scanning for any signs of surveillance or ambush. The checkpoint marker was more challenging to locate than the first, requiring several minutes of searching through thick undergrowth before Sarah found the numbered plaque attached to a tree trunk. As she photographed the marker, she heard the distinct sound of tracking dogs in the distance. Sarah's blood ran cold. The hunter-killer teams were using canine units to track candidates, a development that would make concealment significantly more difficult. Dogs could follow scent trails that humans would never detect, and their presence meant that Sarah's movement routes would need to account for wind direction and terrain features that might carry her scent to pursuit teams. The third checkpoint was located approximately 4 miles to the east, but the direct route would take her directly through an area where she had observed helicopter activity. Sarah would need to circle around to the north, adding distance and time to her movement, but avoiding the most heavily patrolled areas. As darkness began to fall, Sarah realized that she would need to continue her mission during nighttime hours. The temperature was dropping rapidly, and intermittent snow showers were beginning as the weather front that Colonel Morrison had mentioned moved through the area. Sarah had 2 remaining checkpoints to locate and photograph, plus she needed to reach the extraction point before the 12-hour deadline. The approaching darkness would provide concealment from visual observation, but it would also make navigation more difficult and increase the risk of injury from falls or exposure. As she prepared for nighttime movement, Sarah heard a voice in the distance, human voices calling out search patterns and coordination instructions. The hunter-killer teams were closing in on her area, and she would need to move immediately to avoid capture. Sarah gathered her gear quickly and began moving toward her third checkpoint, using the darkness and terrain features to avoid detection while fighting against fatigue and cold that threatened to compromise her judgment. The final phase of her individual assessment was about to begin, and everything she had worked for during 6 months of training depended on her performance during the next few hours. Behind her, she could hear the pursuit teams growing closer, their voices and equipment sounds carrying clearly through the cold mountain air. Sarah pushed forward into the darkness, knowing that capture would mean immediate failure and the end of her dreams of joining the Special Operations Program. But ahead of her lay the possibility of completing one of the most challenging individual assessments in the military, earning not just a place in the program, but the respect of soldiers who had once dismissed her as inadequate. In the distance, a wolf howled, its voice echoing off the mountain peaks and reminding Sarah that she was truly alone in this wilderness test of her capabilities. But For the first time since beginning the assessment, she felt genuinely confident in her ability to succeed. Her preparation, determination, and tactical thinking had brought her this far, and she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in the darkness.